Welcome to DAWG of the Decade, where you, the viewer, gets to choose Georgia's best player of the past 10 years. There have been a number of greats come through the hallowed hedges of Sanford Stadium through that time, but one man must stand alone at the end. We've got greats listed from the top to the bottom, and we'll be going through each matchup in depth, breaking down video, accomplishments, and everything in between when it comes to the greats of the Georgia football program. Who will stand alone at the top? It remains to be seen, but you will be the ultimate decider.
Let's go into some detail regarding UGASports' DAWG of the Decade tournament, where you, the subscriber, will vote on what will wind up being 63 different matchups in the 64-man field. That's from the first rounds all the way through the championship matchup. Determine who is Georgia football's greatest, best, top, whatever you want to call it, player from the 2010 through 2019 seasons. First off, how we determined the 64-man field was UGASports staff members each ranked their top, say, 70 or 80 players from the last decade. The rankings were combined, and this resulted in a composite top 64, whereby each of the 64 players was then appropriately seated and positioned in exact fashion to where your typical 64-man or team tournament would have them. Also, like your typical 64-man team tournament, there are 4 different 16-player brackets: the Arch bracket, Hedges bracket, Ugga the mascot bracket, and Chapel Bell bracket. With the final 4, the winner of the Arch bracket will face the winner of the Hedges to reach the championship matchup, if you will, against the top vote getter between the winners of the Ugga and Chapel Bell brackets. Now let's take a look at each of the 4 individual 16-player brackets, spotlighting the top-seeded player while adding maybe a noteworthy thing or two regarding each bracket. With the Arch bracket, and who we deemed the number 1 overall seed for the DAWG of the Decade tournament, and that's running back Todd Gurley, of course, from 2012 through 14. Gurley in just 3 seasons rushed for 3,285 yards as a Bulldog, which is the 4th most at the school. He also had 36 rushing touchdowns, which is tied for the 3rd most in school history. His 6.44 yards per rushing attempt is the most by any Bulldog in history. Gurley is matched against the number 64 overall seed, a teammate of Gurley's, receiver Marlon Brown. Something else to point out about this bracket, you'll notice current player Eric Stokes is the 9th seed. Of the 64 players in this tournament, 4 are current players on the what will be the 2020 roster. Besides Stokes, there's 5th-seeded receiver George Pickens, who is of the 4 the highest-seeded current player. Besides Pickens and Stokes, there's also 8th-seeded Richard LeCount in the tournament, along with linebacker 11th-seeded Monty Rice. Heading straight down, there's the Hedges bracket, and its top seed linebacker Roquan Smith, who is our overall number 4 seed. In 2016, as a sophomore, Roquan led Georgia in tackles and followed that up with arguably the greatest season ever by a Georgia defender in 2017. He was the SEC Championship Game MVP, as well as the Rose Bowl's Defensive MVP. He won the Butkus Award that year, which goes to the nation's top linebacker, the first time Georgia ever had a Butkus winner, and he finished 10th in the Heisman Trophy voting in 2017. Another 10th place finisher in the Heisman in this bracket. This bracket's number 2 seed, the number 5 seed overall, is linebacker Jarvis Jones. Jones and Smith are 2 of the 14 linebackers that are in this tournament. That's a lot of linebackers. 14 of the 64 players in this tournament are linebackers. 6 of the 14 are in this particular bracket. After linebackers, the top position group featured in this tournament is both wide receivers and offensive linemen with 10 players each. Heading across and up the entire bracket, there's the Ugga region or bracket, and its top seed receiver A.J. Green. From 2008 through 2010, Green totaled 166 receptions for 2,619 yards and 23 touchdowns. You know, it's important to point out, I think, that Green is one of a handful of players who played in just one season from the 2010 through 2019 timeframe. However, as long as a player played in at least one season during the last decade, his entire career at Georgia, in Green's case, 08 through 2010, was considered. Players with similar circumstances include this region's third seed, linebacker Justin Houston. Also in another bracket, there's 6-seeded Clint Bowling and 11-seeded Akeem Dent. And finally, heading straight down is the last bracket, the Chapel Bell bracket, and its top seed running back Nick Chubb, who is our overall number 3 seed. Chubb, of course, from 2014 through 2017, gained 4,769 career rushing yards, had 44 career rushing touchdowns in 24 career 100-yard rushing games. All 3 of those are second in school history, behind the legendary Herschel Walker. Speaking of which, Chubb and Herschel are the only 2 Georgia players in history with 3 separate 1,000-yard rushing seasons. Something I'll point out about this bracket, something else, is 4-seeded Brandon Boykin, whose position is recognized as AP or all-purpose. There are 4, quote, AP all-purpose players in this tournament. Besides 4th-seeded Brandon Boykin, there's also 4th-seeded McCole Hardman, 7th-seeded Terry Godwin, and 9th-seeded Isaiah McKenzie. Wraps up this portion of UGA Dog of the Decade tournament. Stay tuned within the next several days or so, where you will be able to vote on the first matchups that we reveal.